This is episode number 152 of the Guns Magazine podcast. Hi there, and welcome to the Guns Magazine podcast, one of the shooting world's biggest gun talk programs. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent Wheat. Thanks for joining us as we talk to the interesting folks who make up the world of shooting, hunting, law enforcement, and the firearms industry. First, before we get started, let's have a quick chat about our sponsor, 1791 Gunleather. Centuries ago, the original patriots of this country fought and died for the promises they protected in the Constitution. Chief among those promises was the right to bear arms. Now, generations later, 1791 Gunleather now protects that right and our firearms. Makers of the 2020 Holster of the Year, every 1791 holster is a mastery of craft and function, customizable to any firearm you require. 1791 Gunleather provides quality and service in the way only an American company can. Please visit 1791gunleather.com for more information. Today is a first for the Guns Magazine podcast. It's our first live episode. This all came about as we were discussing what folks should be doing with their guns if they've been submerged or otherwise soaked. Obviously, this is a pretty important topic right now as Hurricane Ian has and is battering the southeast U.S. as we're recording this episode. I spoke to Special Assignments Editor Roy Huntington about the problem, and as usual, he had lots of good info, so I thought, let's just go live on Facebook so we can get that information out even quicker to those folks who might be affected. Now here's the audio from the entire Facebook Live episode of the Guns Magazine podcast on what to do when your guns get really, really wet. Well, everybody, they say we're live. Welcome. Welcome to the Guns Magazine podcast, episode number 152, live on Facebook of all things. So I am Guns Magazine editor and podcast host Brent Wheat, and I've been joined by Roy Huntington, our special assignments editor. Howdy, Roy. Good afternoon.
Howdy, sir. I feel like I'm going live.
Well, so far, nobody has texted me and said, you're not live yet. So I'm assuming we're going out literally on the World Wide Web. Well,
good Lord.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to doing this. We've done some live stuff, but it's been a long, long time. So I'm excited about it, a little nervous about it. This is truly live without a net. We did a special episode of the podcast earlier this week. I was talking to our team, and we were discussing then Hurricane Ian that hadn't hit Florida yet. And they were talking about, they being American Handgunner editor Tom McHale and our digital content manager, Ashley McGee. Ashley, I remembered your name. And they've got experience dealing with hurricanes. So we did a special episode midweek, and that got a lot of traction. Folks looking for ideas on what to do about dealing with their firearms. And literally an hour ago, I was editing what was going to be today's episode of the podcast, and I realized Tom McHale and Ashley live in Charleston, South Carolina. And if you haven't been following the news, they're getting hammered right now. And as a matter of fact, Tom McHale just texted his cell phone's going in and out. His power's been off for a while. So I invited both him and Ashley to join us, but we may not see them. But anyway, we were talking about hurricane preps, and I realized after following all the tragedy and turmoil in Florida with Hurricane Ian that now the problem turns to cleaning up. And I texted Roy Huntington and said, what would you do? Is there much to talk about if your guns get drenched, or do you just call the insurance company and say, how much will you give me? And Roy's got some really good ideas. So we're going to talk about that. So if you're looking for information on how to deal with your guns, protect them if they've been underwater. Hopefully not, but I've got family in the Florida area and just north of landfall, and fortunately they didn't suffer too much, but some of our FMG family may have lost some homes. So there's going to be a lot of folks out there looking for information about what happens. So Roy, say somebody lives down in Florida or maybe even the Charleston area, and they come home to find their guns have been soaking in salt water for 12 or 24 hours. Do you just call the insurance company, or what do you do? What do you do?
Well, as the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy says, first, don't panic.
Well, that's easy to say, but if you've been through the
Yeah.
storm, the panic time is over. You should be good at that point.
Yeah. I think what's important initially is to the guns are just things and they're just stuff. And so take care of business first, if you need to.
Great point. Great point.
But if you have the ability to, get some attention in that direction, the biggest thing to do is like the old adage about what do you do when you find yourself in a hole? Stop digging. So if your guns are soaked with salt water, which is the real problem, then you need to stop digging that hole. And the best way to do that is to submerge them in fresh water if you have it, just right away. I mean, I don't know if you can fill up the bathtub if water's running. Just put everything in there. If you've got wooden stocked guns, you could take the stocks off. That'll help. And then just get them in some fresh water. And so that's okay. That kind of stops the process for now. I mean, ultimately, fresh water will not be healthy for your guns, but at least it gets rid of a lot of the salt water. The other thing is if you have anything like WD-40, because WD stands for
water
displacement, right? And so you just smother everything with WD-40, and it doesn't matter. Just squirt it everywhere. Work the actions, work the bolts, squirt WD-40 in there. Just get it everywhere. And then that pretty much can effectively put things on hold. I like you can wrap them in tinfoil or wrap them in saran wrap afterwards. So that
not
keeps
your head, not no tinfoil around your head.
Yeah, that's right. Those moments are probably past. I saw a funny sign the other day. It says tinfoil for sale, free hat in every box.
Wow.
I know. It's kind of true.
That's crazy. Before you go on, I forgot to mention at the top of the show is I do have the comments up here. So if you're watching on Facebook, you're listening, watching this live, leave us a comment, leave us a question. I just happened to saw that Ashley still has power in South Carolina. So she checked in and said, hey guys, but yeah, if you got a question or a comment, something you want to ask Roy, I will be trying to watch the screen over there. So let us know what you think or your questions. So Roy, go ahead.
Sure. And something to think about too is that if you don't have WD-40, and not everybody would have WD-40 and maybe in the amounts that you need, is you really need anything kind of petroleum based that you could soak the guns in. So kerosene is terrific. If you've got a couple of gallons of kerosene, that would be wonderful. Diesel fuel would work, not gasoline. Everyone, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, gasoline actually separates from water, so that would be the reverse of what you want, to have happen. And motor oil. I mean, think outside of the box right now. ATF fluid, that would work. Just raid your garage or your neighbor's garage if you need to. And if you have wooden stocks on things, it'd really be good to take the wooden stocks off, because if your guns were really submerged, chances are really good that the wood stocks might not be really recoverable. They tend to warp. The finishes will tend to bubble up. If they're not really bad, a rifle stock will likely need to be refitted to the action, for instance. So, but don't panic if you look and you see light surface rust, which is probably going to be the case because salt water and blued steel, we're talking 5 minutes and you're going to get. But if you've caught this within a day or so, you're probably not going to really have any significant damage. It'll just be finish blemishes kind of stuff. Something to remember, too, is that if you have a Glock or, a polymer pistol, they're not indestructible because some of the innards may rust or corrode. So treat your Glock or treat your polymer pistol the same way you would any other gun. Get those things submerged.
I think that's a good point. Even, any gun is not indestructible because there's probably carbon steel on the inside. And that's just that. And salt water is not a happy mix.
No. And plus you get the residue, the salt residue and all that, but get it flushed out. So really is a flush with fresh water and then a submersion in something petroleum based, but not gasoline, So, and like I said, think out of the box on that to help you with it. You'll probably lose the wood stocks. It'd be good to take all those off anyway. So the whatever fluid you're submerging them in can get to all the little nits and grits. And if your blued gun is rusty, it's like, that's not the end of the world either. So after you get your insurance money back and get settled down, Cerakoting is a great cover for those kind of things, and so your guns will be all right, as long as you take a little bit of preventive maintenance like this. And yeah, you have to remember too, people say, oh, well, my gun's Cerakoted, then it's safe. But yeah, the outside is. But remember, like Brent said, I mean, the innards are still there, and there's carbon steel springs probably. There's, who knows, sear surfaces and stuff like that. And the other thing that everyone assumes is that they go, oh, well, I have a stainless steel gun, so it's King's X, everything's good. Well, no, it's not stainless steel. It's rust resistant steel is what it is. And unless you spend really a lot of money and buy aerospace, kind of, or US Navy kind of stainless steel, the stuff that guns are made out of will still rust. And I know people don't believe me, but we actually did some tests years ago for an article that I did where I put some stainless steel guns, a Ruger, a Smith & Wesson, I forget something else, in the dishwasher. So, and I let them run a cycle. And then I took them out and I let them set. And sure enough, interestingly enough, the Smith & Wesson showed more rust than the Rugers did. It was a stainless single 6.2. And the only advantage to that is the stuff that it does give you a little bit of time. So if you're just coming back to your house, I would tend to the blued guns first. The stainless steel guns, if you don't have enough cleaner or something, they'll be all right. But if you see rust on your stainless steel gun, don't panic, because it's almost always just barely surface rust, even a significant. It looks like, something after a few days, and 4/0 steel wool and a little bit of motor oil or something will get it off. Sometimes it'll leave stains, but at least you're not going to get the kind of pitting that you would get, if you ignored blued steel guns and let them set in your basement for a week.
Well, I was going to say, submerged guns aside, anybody that's been shooting as long as we have, you can always think back to that first day where you pulled out your stainless carry gun and what is this? There's rust underneath the stocks or something. It's like, that's the day you realize that stainless is stain resistant.
Stain resistant. Well, I fix a lot of guns and I fix a lot of stainless steel guns. And I virtually every time when you take wooden grips off of a stainless steel revolver, like old police trade-in gun or that kind of stuff, they're almost always rusty, underneath. And that brings up another good point, because like Smith & Wessons, especially, even if they're stainless steel guns, the mainspring is carbon steel, and there are other parts in this gun, probably the grip screws and sights and all that. And so they'll all rust away. But just remember, you need to just stop it from occurring immediately, which means, just throw it in that bucket of diesel fuel or something like that, if you have that.
After you rinse it, because I was going to say earlier on and didn't want to stop you, but floodwaters, storm surge, whether you're fresh or salt, is one of the nastiest substances on Earth. You've got ruptured sewer systems, you've got petroleum products, you've got every kind of nasty thing in the entire world is floating in that water. So not only do you need to take care of your guns, you need to take care of yourself, obviously, because floodwater is just awful, awful stuff. And then when it meets up with carbon steel or any kind of steel, really, it gets really a nasty situation. But I know, Roy, like following history, the C.S. Hunley, which was the Confederate submarine that supposedly was the first one that ever sunk a warship, they recovered it from the bottom of Charleston Harbor, ironically. And what they did to preserve it, they put it in a giant tank of fresh water. And I thought, that was the first time I realized fresh water is kind of the antidote to salt water. And then they did a bunch of things beyond that, electrolysis and some stuff there. But the first aid for the steel that had been in salt water was fresh water. And I thought that was pretty fascinating. So same thing with guns, fill your tub with some kind of potable fresh water and let them take a bath.
Yeah. And just toss them in there. Then now to go take our other business, and you've got a couple days there. If it's something that's not taking time away from what you need to be doing, then go ahead. Why not, fix them. And, about insurance, people say, oh, I think at the beginning you said, do you just call your insurance company? Well, a lot of people don't even really pay much attention to the fact that most homeowners policies have riders that limit the coverage of firearms and jewelry and things. And it's the rare one that will cover firearms more than $10,000, unless you have a specific rider, where you've insured them for more of that. Well, in the real world, $10,000, that doesn't buy you a lot of firearms.
Right.
I mean, 3 or 4 rifles and 3 or 4 handguns, and you're there.
And we talked about that in the early special episode this week with Tom and Ashley, that some policies are actually going down. It may be even $500 if you have a anti-gun type of insurance company. So once the gun's wet, it's too late to find out. But for the vast majority of folks who have not experienced that, you really, really need to get with your insurance company, look at your policy, and figure out, do you need a rider? And I would say many of our viewers and listeners that are avid shooters and gun collectors, you probably do need a rider, and it's going to cost you money. But do you just write off your collection if the worst happens? And, that's another thing that you see very commonly after these big storms, especially in the case of like Fort Myers Beach. You have a lot of folks that have ridden out hurricanes before. And I saw countless comments, people saying this, I never imagined this would happen to us because we've been through this and my home never flooded. I will say that one of our coworkers who has a beachfront house, he fortunately was not there. Not only did the first floor get destroyed by storm surge, the second floor did. So they're talking 12 to 16 feet of storm surge. So that pretty much gets the second floor of just about any house I know of. So if you live, other than maybe the desert Southwest, and even there, you get flash floods occasionally, water can meet up with your gun collection. So going full circle, you need to go back, look at your policy, talk to your insurance agent, and make sure you are covered, or you may get an unpleasant surprise on top of all the other unpleasant surprises. And before I relinquish back over to Roy, we make sure that you check out us live on Facebook and leave a comment or a question for Roy before we get done here. And Ashley just left a comment that she's seen them pull a Harley out of the ocean down in Fort Myers. So that's a bad day too.
Dump it in the bathtub right away.
Big hot tub. I
suppose that would work.
Yeah.
I think it's something that's important, and I don't think we can stress this enough, is that I said earlier, well, they're just things, Right. And I know that it could be your grandpa's heirloom, and I know you could have that. But if you're looking around, you've got your fingers and toes, the dog made it through, your kids called you, they're all right, well, then this other stuff is just stuff, and it's easy. So, don't panic about the guns. A lot of people think a high quality safe too, it will protect them from that. But no, they're not. No, they're not waterproof. I don't think I've ever seen one waterproof unless you got a specifically like a Pelican type case.
Right.
But a standard safe is not waterproof. And as a matter of fact, I've seen damaged guns from safes after fires. And it's really interesting. What happens is that they heat up, and then water's introduced by fire department or breaking fixtures or whatever. And then as things cool, they tend to have a change of air pressure. And a lot of times they'll actually suck in air, from the outside. Well, this is air full of toxic. It's like floodwater, only it's air, right? Every kind of disastrous thing in there. And then but then they sit in the safe for 2 or 3 days. And when you open the safe up, it's unbelievable what they look like. Yeah. I mean, they're covered in black crud and rusted or
incinerated, in the case of a fire, even though it's a fire safe,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We had someone who works with us had their house burned, and some of his guns were in the fire, and they're not recoverable. I mean, because the heat changes the spring tensions, changes heat treating and stuff like that. It was actually clever, though. He took one of his revolvers and someone turned it into a cutaway gun, because it could never be fired again, but it still functioned, so I thought that was a good idea. And now we're talking about guns here, but we should probably talk about ammo too.
Yeah. What do you do? It's been underwater and it's all wet, but the ammo looks fine, right? I'll just hang on to it and I can put it in my gun and we'll go shooting.
Well, it's really funny. This is a topic that's just really crawling with old wives' tales, basically. I mean, because if you ask 10 shooters, they're going to give you 10 different answers. And it's pretty much all just, hey, well, I heard from this guy one time, well, I've actually spent a lot of time reading military reports, and I know manufacturers who make ammunition to meet mil-spec things and stuff like that. And I'm here to tell you that consumer ammunition is not made to the same standards. And you can't rely on it to be that way. We did a really extensive test about, 15 or 20 years ago in American Handgun, where one of our writers had gotten a broad cross-section of commercial over-the-counter consumer ammunition and put them in 5-gallon jugs, multiple different ones, right, for different manufacturers. And then he let them stay for different periods of time. So the first one was like an hour and they all fired, right? But what he did, and it was smart, which was one that was set up for several hours. They shot, but he saved some and he just let them sit. And so we don't have to revisit that. Sure enough, later on, some of those rounds were either duds after they sat, or it had significantly affected the performance of the powder. So they were like poof, and getting hang fires and just all kinds of craziness. But basically what we found out was that while some ammunition will still work even after several days in being submerged, we both came away with the impression that none of it is reliable. In other words, you can't rely on commercially loaded ammunition to not be affected by submersion.
Right. And the big danger there is not the ammo not working, it's it almost working or working just a little bit, and that would be a squib. So shooting a revolver, shooting a lever gun, you shoot it and you think the bullet exited the barrel and it didn't, and you can still work the action, put a new round in there, and now you got a party in your hands. And I'm being very facetious about that. The other thing, I got to interrupt here. I'm trying to multitask because I don't have our thousands of production people here in my home office. And I
have to add, Brent's usually a monotasker.
Absolutely. So. I am out of RAM and there is no upgrade, but I was mistaken. I was trying to, watch and listen to what Roy said. And what I said about Ashley was not a Harley. She was talking about the Hunley, because she lives in Charleston. So,
but a Harley, that painted a vivid mental picture, though. This dripping Harley coming out of the.
Well, I'm absolutely positive. I'm sure that has happened down in Florida. So, like I said, before we continue, if you're on Facebook watching us, leave a comment, ask a question, something like that, and I will try to actually use something called reading comprehension and actually get the question out. But so, Roy, let's, going back to the ammunition part of this is, squib, bad deal. But what would you suggest doing with the ammo that has probably gotten wet and probably soaking in it and not worth hanging on to? Or is it?
Well, don't clean it up and then resell it. I mean, don't be that guy. I'm sure
that's happened. Yeah.
Okay. If it were me, and especially 22 long rifle ammo, because with a lot of 22 long rifle, if you actually hold the bullet in the case and turn them, you'll feel the bullet will turn. Yeah. So they're not sealed at all. And you may get some that work fine. I mean, to me, they can't blow up or anything, but to me, it becomes plinking ammo. And, bang, bang, click, click, bang, click, and just pay attention so you don't get that squib load that stays stuck in the barrel. Hey, it's like, hey, I'm shooting at the target, but how come I'm not hitting it? It's because the bullets are building up in the barrel, you idiot. I once machined a Model 10 Smith & Wesson barrel in half because the guy was complaining that it wasn't hitting the target. He fired 7 rounds, which means he fired 6, reloaded, and fired a 7th round until that blocked up the cylinder. So I have a picture. The whole barrel was full of 38 special round nose lead bullets.
Wow.
Which is actually a testimony to the old Model 10 because nothing blew up, you know.
But he's awfully lucky.
Awfully lucky. But so pay attention to that. If your ammo's been submerged, and I don't care if it's been submerged for an hour, it's plinking ammo now, ladies and gentlemen. Yep. And I know you may not like that. So all you people with 50,000 rounds of 223 in your basement who live in Florida that's been under 10 feet of water for the last day and a half, I mean, unless they're sealed, you know, in military ammo cans and the seal's not broken, I mean, it's time for a fire sale, you know, or a flood sale. The other thing that people forget about is a lot of this surplus ammunition has steel cases. And yes, they're usually sprayed with some kind of a lacquer preservative, but usually it's not real good. And handling, bouncing around against other ammunition, it tends to nick that lacquer. And what happens with steel and salt water, you know?
Yep.
So you'll get rusty bullets there too. So that's a 2 strikes because not only was it submerged, now the case is rusty. So, you know, don't be oh, heck no, it's okay, it'll work, you know, and put it in your favorite gun and pull the trigger because that's, you know, that's silly. If you really want to have something to do, is you can get like clear fingernail polish, or you can get some, not shellac because shellac isn't waterproof, but I imagine like a polyurethane, although they make products specifically for sealing ammunition. You could actually seal ammunition. And so, you know, if you want to go so far as to do that for several hundred rounds or something, in case something, you know, or put it in new GI ammo cans so it's safe.
I was going to go there. Let's talk a little bit about storage, because you can go to any gun show, you can order them offline, all kinds of ammo cans. And I have no idea how many you own, Roy, but I've got allegedly the 4th largest privately held collection of ammo cans. I've got them in storage units. I've got stuff in them. But I think the key here is by the time you get it, it may be waterproof or it may not. So I don't count on it absolutely as being waterproof. There's a couple of things that I want to make absolutely sure do not get wet. They're in the ammo can, plus bags, and maybe even a desiccant package and those kind of things. So if I lived in an area where it was highly likely I'd get flooded out at some point, be thinking ahead that don't just trust the ammo can. I mean, that it's great protection and you're probably going to be okay, but would it withstand 10 feet of storm surge and sand and tumbling? If it was stuff that I wanted to absolutely make sure stayed dry, I would add multiple layers of protection.
And I actually don't have very many ammo cans because I hate to try to open them. You know, it seems like they always want to fight you. I did notice one time I got 4 or 5 ammo cans, and I was able to buy a replacement gasket. You can find gaskets for them again, and as long as you clean them and then assemble them correctly with the gasket, you're probably there. I'll tell you something that a lot of people don't think about is that chances are pretty good in your kitchen. You've got one of those vacuum sealed bag things, right? Well, the next time you've got 10 minutes and your wife isn't around because she'll wonder why you're doing this and give you the look, right? Just get a box of ammunition and put it in one of those little bags and cut it and vacuum seal it. And it's amazing because you have just created this indestructible, will probably last for the next 300 years, water, every kind of resistant thing in the world. I've used that to store collectible ammunition boxes. If you get this really pristine full box of, Target wad cutters from 1942, and that you just want to keep it nice, it's amazing. It works wonders. So maybe if I lived in Florida and chances are really good, I would just take my time and do that to a lot of my sort of long-term storage ammunition. So,
well, I've talked to friends down there and they've done, I'd forgotten about it, but exactly what you said of sealing a handgun and ammo in an ammo can just for that eventuality of, even if you're carrying a gun on your person, you might get wet too. I mean, you hope not, but you've seen a lot of folks having to wade through water and swim and that kind of stuff. So if I lived down there or I lived along a river somewhere else where there's a, reasonable likelihood of getting flooded, I would strongly consider, putting up in an ammo can, vacuum sealed, desiccants, the whole shooting match, so that if things get really sideways, I know I've at least got a workable handgun that has dry ammunition. So
I think that's a great idea. It's almost like you just grab it box.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little cleaning kit, some gun oil, a small spray can of WD-40, 50 round box of ammo in your gun. There used to be a custom pistol smith, and I can't recall who it was now, but if he worked on your gun and when he returned it, your gun would be it was some kind of like a silicone oil. It was really pretty. I mean, it was always shiny and looked beautiful.
Yeah.
But then he would wrap it in saran wrap, and then he would wrap that in a soft piece of towel, and then he would vacuum seal the whole thing. And that's how you got your gun returned to you. And so the first one I got like that, I called him up and I said, but I mean, I'm really glad to see that my gun arrived. It was pristine. It was beautiful. And I said, but do you do that all the time? And he said, yes, because he had returned a client's gun one time, and thank you, FedEx, UPS, or the post office. The box had gotten wet, and so now it's sat for the week while it was being shipped. And when the custom gun, client got his gun, it was rusted and it was terrible.
Oh.
But I just thought, gosh, what a great idea. I mean, if you really have a collection of nice old guns that you're just holding on to because you think you're going to sell someday, good Lord, do that. Treat them with some treatment and wrap them in, because you need to wrap them in a cloth because a sharp, pointy edge of a gun might poke the plastic, right?
Yep.
And vacuum seal them. Plus, they look cool.
Well, if you're watching us live and it's kind of kicking in and out, somebody's internet is not behaving. It might be mine, it might be Roy's, or it could be our evil overlords. But we're going to wrap this up here pretty quick. But like I said, if you're watching us live on Facebook, you've still got time to ask a question in the comments, and we'll try to answer it. But Roy, let's go back over the top. Immediate action drill, emergency drill after you're safe, your pets are safe, and you've not got any life saving type things you need to do. What do you do with your guns?
Get them in fresh water, rinse them off really good, even if all you have is a hose or something. And then your next step, as immediately as possible, is get them submerged, WD-40, diesel fuel, kerosene, anything like that, but not gasoline. So motor oil, automatic transmission fluid, and get the wooden parts off the guns when you do that. That's what you do. And then the clock stops. So you're all right.
Well, good information, and I appreciate you talking to me on literally last second notice. I hope folks have enjoyed this live episode of the Guns Magazine podcast, episode number 152. Hopefully, I don't think we had too many gaffes, so I think that's going to work out just fine. But I would also like to point out that the Guns Magazine podcast is sponsored by 1791 Gunleather. You can visit all their great products at 1791gunleather.com. So, Roy, it's been great, and I'm seeing a couple of magazine articles about all this stuff, taking care of your guns after disasters. So I appreciate you joining me. And of course, thoughts and prayers go out to all our friends in Florida that are dealing with that. Like I said, my family and friends are fine, but I know quite a few that aren't. And actually, I got a text during this. One of our coworkers looks like his house is going to be totaled. So lots of folks are going to have a pretty long road ahead of them. And since we are live, I know Ashley McGee, our digital content editor, is listening. Tom McHale, the American handgunner editor, apparently he's off the grid now, so I hope you guys are doing just fine out there. But again, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat, joined by special assignment editor Roy Huntington. I really appreciate that. And we will see you next episode. We'll, I assume, go back to our normal format. We'll have that recorded, and it'll be out next Friday. So good to see everybody. Good to hear from everybody. And again, thank you, Roy.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
I hope you've learned something from this special live episode, but I also hope you'll never need it. If there's a topic you want to hear, someone you'd like us to interview, or you just want to share your thoughts, please drop me a line at editor@gunsmagazine.com. As always, you can find us on your favorite podcast directory, YouTube, and at gunsmagazine.com. And while you're online, don't forget to check out our great sister publications, American Handgunner Magazine at AmericanHandgunner.com, AmericanCop.com, and our numerous special editions available for sale on our websites and at Amazon.com. That's it for this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. For the entire staff at FMG Publications, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat. Now get out there and get shooting.